So we've done spaces before, but there was with Tony or somebody else was on, so it was like a 3 or 4 way chat. This is the first time we've done a one-on-one space. And I invited you because I think you're a very important voice in Min Twit, if we want to call it that. This little, universe of strange people who sit on X and talk about this downtrodden sector we call junior mining. And you have a pretty good track record in terms of stock ideas, and you put out some pretty good insights that are a little bit more detailed than the typical person on X. And we got to know each other through American Eagle over the last year, and we obviously, just went on a site visit. So I wanted to get to know a little bit more about you and how you got involved in junior mining. So I guess tell us your background story and how did you get to where you are today as an investor in the sector?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to share. And thanks for the invite. Actually, I think this is one of my first, one-on-one direct interviews with anybody in this space as it is. So thank you for hosting me. Yeah, as far as origin story goes, I'd say as of like the 2008, 2009, I found myself with finally maybe a little bit more available disposable income that I figured I better get started on sorting out and understanding investing world. So I took to the internet and I started looking around, and I got exposed to some of the material from John Bogle and the Canadian couch potato, and got into investing in index investing for the diversification, and the fact that they quote things like, 95% of money managers out there can't beat the market, so why don't you just own the market? And I was pretty happy with that at first too, especially given I hadn't really paid any attention to markets up until then, and entering any time into that space in 2008, 2009 was an absolute stroke of luck for me. So I was happy with that and resigned myself to that at the time. But I'm the kind of guy where, I think about the statements and material I read, and I was thinking, hang on a second, what about that other 5%? And so that's where I started digging some more, and started to see some of the material from what's his name, Jay Swagger's The Market Wizards, and then went on to dig in deep into Peter Lynch's One Up on Wall Street, and then just reading stuff like I forget the author's name, but Reminiscence of the Stock Operator, and learning a little bit more about how individuals who participate in the market behave and what can happen and potential rewards for similar activities. So yeah, that was some material that I was exposing myself to, and then it just so happened that a family friend of mine approached me and learned about some of the my investing strategies and to date, and he was telling me about the junior mining space. So I would say that would be the initial introduction to that. And yeah, I'll put my hand up. The first exposure to the junior uranium space back in 2000 and it'd be about 2010, 2011. Was into the uranium space. This individual was very much a newsletter subscriber, and had experienced the heydays of the Vancouver Stock Exchange. So he was telling me a lot about how the world worked and the way he viewed it with regards to the junior space, and was very focused around promotional activity and such. And so that was a great start, and got me hooked into the space. I had some early successes with the Hathor project between the Rio Tinto takeover. I came in right as that happened, so I thought of myself as a genius for some of my initial deployed capital there. And then I was involved with fission in the early days discoveries at the Patterson Lakeside, which was, again, I just felt like everything I touched just kept going places I wanted it to. And then I remember being introduced to some of the characters that we know and in some cases miss today. I mean, Pamplona Trader on the Stockhouse billboards, and Warren Irwin and some of the work that they were doing, and identification of potential value at NextGen was my next step into, and I promptly made some more returns there. Now, mind you, these are all relative to the amount that I was deploying back then, and I'll tell you right now, it was not that much. I would say it was a young guy with a couple bucks that turned into a couple more. So I was pretty fast and loose with the risk, and that was definitely one of the areas where I didn't necessarily put a lot of effort into. And it was also a case of me relying a lot on other people's work at the time. I had little in the way of any technical understanding for some of these materials that I was exposing myself to. And as a result, as we started to get towards the 2016 timeframe, I took some heavy beatings across almost everything and anything that I owned. So yeah, that was the first, what got me hooked. I guess I should say what got me in, what got me hooked, and then my initial foray into getting beat up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Your story is very similar to a lot of other people's stories in the sector, where you read some articles, you get interested, you get more curious, and then you have some good results, you have some good outcomes early on. So starting in 2010, and Nate, when I'm talking, you can just put yourself on mute so there's a little less background noise for the listeners. Thank you. Yeah, so like starting in 2010 would be like starting in 2016 for a lot of people. 2010 was a good year. It was a great year for metals and mining, and that continued into 2011. And I do remember Hathor was a big win for a lot of people around that 2011 timeframe. So that's interesting that you had good results, and that was sort of got you hooked. It's very similar to me, starting a bit earlier, 2003. Had some good results, and it sort of got me hooked. You have to have that win to convince yourself that you can do it again. I think if somebody starts off with a lot of losses, they're more prone to just quit and say, "Yeah, let's just put it, in like an index fund." So you told us about Hathor. You told us about that win. You told us about your risk management game was a little questionable early on. Tell us about a big, mistake or like a big loss that you had where, you learned from it.
Yeah, I would say I didn't learn from my mistakes early on with regards to risk management, and especially for, we'll say, allocation of position sizes. I only really learned that lesson here actually after 2021 coming into 2022. I was hot off my success with Filo, and I had a little extra to move around, and did not anticipate the 2022 downturn to be as severe as it was. And unfortunately, I had over allocated into two projects. Actually, I didn't talk a whole heck of a lot about them on account of I don't usually go public with regards to any of the projects I have a lot of exposure to, unless I have a high conviction. But I did flag it on Twitter here, and you can look it up and see where I took the L's on ZACA and EDGM. Both were very early projects, one in Arizona and the other one in BC. And yeah, they looked good on paper, but in reality, they both didn't pan out. In ZACA's case with the Red Top project, it ended up being a buried porphyry that was just a little too deep. And then in EDGM's side, it ended up being an unproductive porphyry intrusive. So ultimately, both those projects turned into dusters. And yeah, I can say my portfolio was worse for wear. Luckily enough, I had a good chunk of it in a taxable account, so I was able to realize that as a benefit. But that doesn't make the pain and searing, loss that much sweeter. That's for sure.
Are you talking about, ZACA?
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
ZACA.
EDGM, EDGM on the Canadian Stock Exchange, and then ZACA, ZACA on the venture.
Let's talk about that one. Because seeing you in American Eagle now, there's some similarities, but there's also some glaring differences between ZACA and something, like American Eagle. Like I do recall ZACA, they were at a conference I attended in March 2022, and I sat in for the CEO's pitch. And it drew some yellow, red flags for me. And it was definitely high risk, high reward, right? So you're drilling deep porphyry targets in Arizona as an early stage venture capital funded company, right? That's always tricky. What were some of the things that maybe you learned from that experience, and that maybe you might not make that investment again in the future, or would you do it again?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yeah, what attracted me to ZACA and EDGM was some of the preliminary geophysics work, right? Looking for porphyry systems has largely become more challenging because a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been plucked, right? And so what is available to the investor for research is, of course, a lot of data and material out there that can show you the fingerprints of successful projects, right? There's a lot of projects out there who subsequently have had follow-up geophysics work, and that's available and out there for review. So when I approached ZACA and EDGM in this case, both of them presented what would be, the classical porphyry footprint with regards to the signature IP study. And that's what got me in. Now, would I do it again? I think I would. I really do, on account of I think some of these geophysical signature sets can be knockouts. Case in point, the reason I was into AE early days was because of the geophysical signature that was registered. What I wouldn't do is necessarily allocate as much risk as I did. Right? I think it's fair to take swings at these things, but you need to be responsible with regards to your allocation of risk to it.
All right, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there in terms of the risk management side of things. So, with something like a ZACA, I would say that with AE, they've got 17 holes, into this, deposit. They've done a lot of work on it in a little over 2 years. There were some drill holes put in by another operator, 95, 96 timeframe. So they've got a pretty good amount of data at this point. So the risk is a little lower. Obviously, there is still risk because it is exploration, of course. But with something like ZACA, like how much larger might your holding be in something that's much more advanced, like a NAC project, relative to something like ZACA, where you're drilling really deep holes into kind of a blind target?
Yeah, I think it's important for a discerning speculator to take on and look into and really understand what they're after, right? In my experience, and this is, I guess we should back up and look at this, talk a bit more about strategy and focus, right? So I myself am very focused on copper porphyry projects, and then taking into account what we have for level of technical details for preliminary exploration, and then any of that initial exploration. So when you're looking at a project, the level of risk allocation should be relative to that amount of data available to you. And this is an iterative process, right? So anytime that you encounter a project and you get involved, you have to have your failure criteria established, right? So when you understand that you're what state you are technically at the development of the project and how mature it is, you'll be allocating to that. And then upon any subsequent piece of information, you should subject it to that failure criteria analysis, right? And if it meets or exceeds, if it meets the failure criteria, you need to remove yourself. But if it is failing to meet the failure criteria, it means you've probably had some positive developments with regards to the project itself. Now, will it ultimately prove economical? That's to be determined. But that's as you move along the development of exploration of a project, where you revisit it and then assess your risk allocation. So, for example, in the case of AE, or some of my other previous successes with Filo, or Brixton, or what are some other ones I've been public about? Aldebaran and Regulus, right? So all these projects have a level of development and where they're at, right? Each one of them would, I would say, be the responsibility of the speculator to take a look at where they're at and then identify. And that's where I would say Twitter and the MinTwit space, now X space, or whatever we want to call it, is a huge boon to the speculator, on account of we can come up with ideas, table them, and get them beat up, shot down, right? I would say if anything, anybody who engages with my material in the future should understand that I'm putting it out there to see and hear and get feedback and comment, right? I'm looking for that critique, because ultimately my take is one, but maybe others with more experience or other experiences can share, right? So to rehash, it would be always understand where you are, try to understand where it could go, risk allocate relative to that, iterative process, so revisit, and then add or remove level of risk allocated, and go from there. I think the other thing too is to always be learning, right? Like I focus on the copper porphyry space, and the benefit of having that space is that there's a lot of targets out there that have been developed and a lot that have failed. And I would say studying the failures is arguably as or more important than studying the successes. It's very important, of course, to study the successes, because then you know what success could potentially look like. But knowing what failures look like will also help you quickly reallocate your risk upon any development of a project.
Yeah, I think what you just said is worth $1 million. So knowing what success looks like is very important, and with Filo would be a great example of that. An American Eagle might be as well. Let's see. But it looks like it's on the way. And then what does failure, look like? Like, what do you not want to see? Like, a company might have a couple good holes, but then they start to miss, and they miss, and they miss. The grade isn't, hanging. The ore body is not so cohesive. It's split up in certain areas. There's a lot. There's a lot there. So that's a great.
Sorry, let me just jump in there. Some of the things you flagged as technical, but the other side, and I would say this is where I was woefully ignorant for a long period of time too, was on the corporate side, understanding the corporate structure, what the actual management team is doing. Are they being responsible? Those are also places where you need to keep an eye on, just to make sure, right? You might have a great project, but if it's run by people who maybe are not aligned with the current shareholders, you have to consider yourself and what level of risk you want to allocate to that.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Yeah, and we could talk about that for a long time. Let's talk about Filo, because Filo is not something I'm as well versed in. Definitely not as well versed as you are. And tell us about how you came to find that opportunity. I think it was back in early 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And just tell us about how that struck your fancy, and what said this is going to be a winner.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have been considerably more quiet on Filo here in the last couple of years on account of there's been some few other people who've picked up the torch and are really running with it. But yeah, back in 2019, I was very interested in the copper space. I'd done some research. Big shout out to Goring, and I'm going to say his last name wrong there, Rotzwig, with regards to some of their early work on the commodity research side. And I've become a copper bull. So I was looking for great copper projects that were out there. And then, of course, we also had the interesting confluence of the COVID situation show up. And so out of NGX was spun Filo and Josemaria, and I'd been following that project from 2016. And then some of the advancements in and around Filo with regards to their surface deposit that they've been drilling off, which to me, from a technical standpoint, I constantly consider as like, well, what's going on? What made that surface project show up, right? So what is the potential of what it looked like in the future? And then as of 2018 and into 2019, Filo had released some excellent results from the early exploration at the depths. And that wasn't widely followed by the market at that time, but a few people were watching it. But then with the 2019 COVID situation that showed up, everything got thrown out with the bathwater. And Filo inclusive, right? And so what I saw out of Filo was the initial results of hole 32, which showed an incredible length of a copper equivalent intercept that was very attractive. And I said to myself, and this is where I threw risk management out the window again, was around the size of my allocation to that project. Given I said, hey, if the world's going to end, this isn't going to matter anyways. And I was looking for probably the best follow-up results that were out there, along with the team that I knew would put those holes, the money in the ground and likely yield as good, if not better, results. And so that was what originally got me into and attractive to Filo. And I'll tell you right now, I did not have the whole 41 the next year in May on my bingo card, but yeah, I was happy for it. Yeah, and then afterwards, the other thing too was Filo became a touch point for a lot of the Mintuit community, which was kind of neat. Engaging with the Pamplona Trader and meeting guys like the Koala, and then a lot of new breed too. I would say we saw a lot of new interested parties come to the table there with the run up of copper in 2020 and 2021. So it's been great to see the community grow, and also. The community that has remained is definitely, it echoes my experience back in 2010 and 11 afterwards, right? So it's interesting. It's fun to work with people who are no stranger to getting punched in the face and smiling at it and then continuing on, right? Who's really interested in the space from there on out. So yeah, Filo overall was a great experience. It was also, I'll tell you right now, I was very quiet and not very public. I only became public in, I think, joined Twitter. I think I'm celebrating my 4th year. I mean, I was very much just an anonymous individual posting on some of the Stockhouse back in the day. But with Twitter and some of the community I saw expressed both from Stockhouse days and from the CEO.ca days, it was great. I said to myself, like, look, I feel confident. I'm no longer just learning. I feel like I moved to that amateur stage, and I would like to be out there and engage with people and meet people and talk to them. So Filo was great from both a capital returns perspective as well as the growing of the community and making new friends.
Yeah, it's a win-win all around. I wish we could have more like those. Just they're not very easy to come by. It was a win-win for the mining sector overall. The story is still playing out, but I have to think that maybe the days are numbered there. Just when you get up to that kind of market cap and the size of the ore bodies that they've demonstrated, it's like, well, how much more upside can there be? But an incredible story since 2020, 2021 timeframe, and you were on it from the get-go there. I do recall that hole you're talking about, the one that was very wide interval of steady grade all throughout. I think that was sometime in spring of 2021, and it sort of lit the fuse there that everybody jumped aboard. A lot of people jumped aboard that. And yeah, I think it was about $5 a share at that time. It's hit 29 or 30 since then. So tremendous wealth driver for the sector, for shareholders since then. So, that's a porphyry play. It's a very special porphyry down there in Argentina, in an area of South America that has these massive deposits, just incredible stuff. So tell us about why you like copper porphyry deposits so much. You've been around for 14 years. You wet your beak with Hathor in Saskatchewan, but now your focus is on copper porphyry deposits. And why do you like these the most?
Yeah, so I touched on a couple of the reasons here, and I'll definitely rehash them. I mean, I'm a huge copper bull, and I'm very technically oriented, as well as I look to the future of like, okay, where are we going to see the level of production that we're going to need if we are going down this electric journey that we seem to be aligning on, as well as where and how do you see the biggest economic potential with regards to larger to the supersized majors of where they're going to want to deploy their capital in the future. And then the other side is that the number of case studies that are out there available, right? So for example, I look at nickel, and I get approached on nickel often, and I mean, I love a good nickel sulfide project. But what I'll tell you is there's just not enough technical detail and technical case studies, in my opinion, to go out there and really say, okay, as an amateur, armchair geologist, because it's not my background, right? My background's in the mining engineering side. I've had to self-teach myself, or self-taught myself all the material here on copper porphyries. Is that there's just such a limited data set on nickel exploration. So I would say it's not my wheelhouse, and I'm happy to step away, right? People come to me on other copper projects, right? Sedimentary or BMS, right? Like these projects, they're don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's plenty of viable projects out there in that space, but it's not my wheelhouse. What I've consciously done is narrowed my view down to copper porphyries because I think, or at least I've convinced myself, I'd like to think, I have enough material out there at my fingertips for study, and that I can put that focus into it so that it can be my swim lane, right? So yeah, the other nice thing about copper porphyries is that they're multi-metal, right? You can have moly heavy, you can have gold and silver heavy, which also helps from that look at, okay, well, overall in a commodity cycle, where and how do you want to see your mining operations positioned, right? To benefit from those all at the same time, or if one's stronger than the other, that also helps and adds to itself a little forgiveness. And I would say that, when you look at a cross-section of all the large and super majors, even across the commodity space, right? You've got even gold projects or gold operators I know, saying or expressing that they seek expansion into the copper porphyry space on account of it will check that gold box, but also give them exposure to the commodity space. I'm sorry, the copper space, which is expected to benefit, right? So I've put my net out in that direction on account of I think it's it behooves an individual speculator to specialize, and as well as assess and consider where and how they can build up a specialty in the space.
Yeah, I think that those are really excellent points, and that's I tend to agree with you, although I think you have to go where the big ore bodies are, to quote someone else in the sector. Um, but there's something about porphyry deposits that just are way more attractive to me at this point in time. So I agree with you, and we share that in common. You have massive ore bodies, so you have size, you have scale that all the majors want, salivating over. You have copper, gold as the two primary, metals. You have a little bit of moly in some of these things as well. Sometimes you get a little sprinkle of silver. All good metals, that we'll take. Um, and yeah, and they're pretty straightforward. So you're not trying to hit a 1 meter wide vein from 300 meters away. You're hitting massive wide intervals of ore. Some of the, like with Filo, 1,000 meter intercept of whatever 0.6% copper equivalent, 0.7% copper. It's just incredible. It's eye popping stuff, right? Like you don't have to be a genius to say, shit, that's a mine. So tell us about your portfolio today. Can you talk your book a little bit for us? How many stocks do you have in your portfolio? What's the weighting? What are you comfortable sharing?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to share. Yeah, so I think to step back, I would say my book kind of runs in three different directions, right? I have my long-term investments. That's where I take any of my major profits and I dump them into it. So it's, of course, I'm running index funds and other for Canada, for example, property otherwise, right? Those are longer term, just locked up, set and forget, and add to as I go. I've got my trading account, which is largely just to scratch that itch, chasing some news headline or otherwise. I try to keep that account very small. I oftentimes lose more or at least charge out in commissions more than I make. And so that largely keeps myself away from doing any damage to myself. And then I have my speculative book, which is almost 100% focused in the junior space. And so, yeah, to talk to some of those names, I mean, we've touched on a couple of them. I mean, Filo features heavily. NGX has joined it at one point and then trimmed down. I've had other projects in there, like I touched on Brixton, Regulus, Aldebaran. They featured in there. Of course, I've got the Tin Baron moniker that I took on in jest and now a badge of pride on account of the Alphamin project is the Impama North and now South joining it. Is actually the only mining company that I own in there. I very rarely own mining companies, period. And then, I've got some AE in there. Well, I'd say it now features a heavily as a larger position on account of the material gain that we've seen on this thing so far. And that largely rounds it up there as far as some of the speculative names in the space.
All right, and what are your largest, like maybe your largest 2 or 3 holdings right now?
Yeah, as of right now, I would say it's definitely AE, Elfman, and Filo. So yeah, usually running concentrated, typically in 5 or less names. In this case, 3 right now.
Okay, and now a really important question. So with something like Filo or AE, I mean, I remember we were sending messages on Twitter. I have to find it, but I believe it was early 2023, and I remember sort of time stamping or stamping on the chart that point in time. That was March. I'm pulling the chart. March 2023. It was 9 cents a share. And it's 70 cents today. So when you have something like that, a junior, where you get in at, let's say, 9 cents or 8 cents or 10 cents, and it does like a 7 or 8x, what is your profit taking strategy? How do you trade that kind of a move?
Sorry, I dropped out there for a second, or maybe you did, but it sounds like you're asking me about where AE was back in March. I think around 20
Yeah.
cents, and
So
now
yeah,
seeing us
just
pop. Yeah.
yeah. So when you have a junior like that, where you get in pretty low, 8, 9, 10 cents, and it does like a 7 or 8x move, what's your profit taking strategy, and like how do you trade that sort of a move?
Yeah, and this is where I initially touched on this, your risk allocation and the reflection, the iterative process of reflecting on where and how you've seen developments of the project's material news releases, right? So you're talking to a guy who originally flagged AE back in 2021 when they flagged that they were pivoting from Nevada to a project they picked up in BC, and I started doing my research on it. I took one of the initial trades on it was actually at less than 3 cents. I was happy to take on a chunk of it. Of course, it wasn't as much risk allocated, but at that time, we saw it up on the initial results from that up into almost 30. So I was sitting on a 10 times return. But at the time, the material that was the material that was delivered with regards to the developments of that project, it didn't fit my criteria. It met my failure criteria, and I had to trade out. I just did not see the level of material development that I wanted to see at that time to say that I want to remain in that project. So small allocation, tremendous return, failure criteria hit, traded out of the project. But that's not to say I didn't keep it on my radar, right? And so I went publicly and started talking about with AE as of 2023, at the end of 2022's delivered results. We started to get more material news that caused me to come back and reflect and look at and reassess where we're at, right? And so at that point, I think we were actually less than 10 cents when I went public and talked about it. And I was displaying and identifying some of the things that were attracting me to come back to this name, right? So as of that, we had the 2023 season and the developments from there, and it actually continued to meet or exceed my success criteria. It continued to fail my failure criteria, let's call it that, which in this case, I was reassessing my strategy and allocating more to it, such that at the end of the 2023 season, I was sitting on one of the more larger returns I've experienced since, as well as the material developments of that project. As of the end of 2023, we then saw Tech step back in, as well as Charlie Greig step back in, and the markets, we'll call it revisit of this project and the subsequent re-rate that we had going into this year, right? So I would say, as of that point in 2023 going forward, I have not taken anything off the table since. I reallocated and allocated more risk to it at that point and have now just been sitting very patiently for the initial results of this year to now revisit and see where we're at, and then of course update my risk allocation to it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question there, right? I've taken you through the journey of what causes a failure and when to take off, as well as where to add more, and the strategy from there.
So let's get it a little more in the weeds there. So what you told me there is you haven't, so since that 9 cent conversation we had in March 2023, you haven't sold, you've actually bought more. Whereas most people in the sector, they would just look at a 2 or 3x and be like, look, I'm out, I'm going to take the win. But they're not, they're just responding to a gain loss in their trading account. They're not looking at the actual data that's coming in as closely as you are. So what was the specific data? Like, so we're not here all day, but maybe you can point out 1 or 2 things that you saw from AE in 2023 that said, you know what, this is not a sell, this is buy more time.
Yeah, so what I'll say is, coming out of 2022, the deep results that we had in the North Zone exhibited some geology and mineralization arrangements that I've not seen in a BC project at that time. I subsequently had to do some digging and found some other projects that I can point to with regards to it. But that's what got me back into it at the end of 2022, start of 2023, with the initial risk allocation. What we then saw over 2023 was the entirely, we'll call it greenfield discovery set that AE was able to expand on. Because I guess we should pause there and say, I had taken the time to review all of the operator work that had been done on that project since the 1970s, right? So I busted out the old ARIS database and went through everything that had been recorded in BC and had been actioned on that project. And so I was able to understand this project a little bit deeper. And so when I started to see the initial results out of 2023, it was showing a material development over the actual results that had been advanced to that date. And so with that, reviewing those results, seeing long runs of continuous interval with higher grades being evidenced in holes. At this time, it was 8. It was the first hole out of the gate. and then subsequently with 10 and 11, I was very confident that I was like, okay, we're into something very unique too, because the other thing to remark on was that mineralization had been discovered in an area none of the other operators had focused on because it was located in the host country rock. Okay, and that's a very unusual thing to see is that level of mineralization endowment enriched in the country rock. Most operators up until that date had focused entirely on the porphyry itself, and as a result had only encountered shallow hits of lower grade materials. And so I guess one of the things that I'll remark on, and I remember saying to myself was, if that level of enrichment was noted in the zone that I largely discounted, what happens when they start to advance and get into the zone that I'm most interested in, which was the results from 2022 in the North Zone. And so that's where I started to consciously push and put on more of a position at that time, on account of I was, it was still early season for 2023, and we hadn't been up to that area yet, right? I guess the other thing too is when I'm saying about the country rock being that enriched, it was a case of like, having seen and studied enough of these projects now, of like, if you see, steps in the snow, right? You wonder, hang on a second, how big are those steps? And can I see where they go, right? And that's what I was seeing is steps in the snow. And so as of the end of 2023, we had results from the North Zone, which showed additional promise. And as well as the final results out of the South Zone with hole 17, which delivered arguably the best results to date out of this project, right? So I was hook, line, and sinker at that point. I was happy to say, this might trade higher at this time, and I could take some off right now, but I'm just going to kick back and relax because this thing just hit, everything that I was expecting out of the park. Now, that's 2022 and 2023, and where we're at going into 2024.
That's great, Nate. Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you. The way that you talk about digging into all the project data going back to the 1970s, that is something that only like an institutional investor or like a royalty fund or something would do, and they probably wouldn't even do it as well as you did it. That's impressive, and that's a lesson for a lot of people on this call who hear it on my YouTube channel. The context is key, and that's something I say over and over again. Context is key in life. Context is key in junior mining, being an investor here, because if you don't have the right context, you can't properly evaluate the data that's coming in. You don't put it in the right context, and you're going to view it maybe in a way that's not accurate. So you had a lot of context to evaluate the 2023 results, and that told you they were very positive. And so now here we are in 2024, and what can you tell us about your expectations for American Eagle in 2024, and what is it that you really want to see that would put this project sort of in a higher tier?
Yeah. So, you kind of getting at it's like what's going to fail this in my books and what's going to see this succeed. So I think anybody new to this project is going to be, in for, a review and take on for last year's, right? And what I could say is, I think we're going to see, we've got two main, well, there's multiple priorities right now, but two are being advanced, right? The one that's getting advanced right now is the work from the Southwest to the Northwest Zone. What I look for on that is to make sure everybody level sets and understands, like, that is host country rock. That rock was barren and unmineralized. Okay, and so when you're reviewing the results of anything drilled out, colored east to the west or colored west to the east towards the porphyry stock, is to understand it's like they're going to be going through and seeing some level of mineralization, and there's going to be areas where there's not going to be as much mineralization. And the important thing to take away from that, though, is does that zone string together? Do we see overall a volume of body rock getting drilled off that could potentially support a mining operation in the future, right? I look at that zone as the bread and butter, as Neil was quoted saying it, right? Like, you look at it and you say, okay, it could just be another high volume set of economic rock, right? But no real differentiator and nothing that really sets it apart, right? There's lots of projects in BC that can probably show you something similar. We see some fancy and high grades out of that, but overall, will it all blend together and come together, right? And so that's priority one for one of the drills right now. What priority two being advanced right now with the drill is in and around the Southwest Zone that largely had sorry, stepping out here for a second, that largely had most of the exploration work done back in the previous operators. Sorry, I'm just resetting up here. In around the high-grade gold zone, okay? And AE to this date hasn't done a lot of work in that zone other than some preliminary work or collaring and traversing out with holes 1, 2, and 8. And to an argument 2 as well as 10. So that's an area that hasn't received a lot of showcasing. And I touched on this in a stack report that I put together where that whole set is focusing on what I think will be the enabler for this entire project. That zone, if it is able to hold together and demonstrate a volume of grade of gold, is going to be where the project future mining operation is kicked off, as it will be used as the scale in point to kick off the mining that will then be able to sustain the future exploitation of the larger southwest to northwest zone. So I can tell you from my initial site visit tour there, one of my big takeaways was the focus into that area has kicked off. And so far, what I've seen is very preliminary promising results. What I look forward to is to seeing how that zone expands. And I think it's going to turn a lot of heads. If you haven't taken a deep dive review or looked through a lot of the material that's available on it, I mean, we're talking 100 meters plus of in some cases excess of 0.7 grams per ton gold alone, let alone the copper kicker. So that southwest zone is going to, I think, jump out at people here later this year when they start to see some of the initial results out of it. And then, yeah, so following up on that, that'll be the initial failure criteria. I mean, if those start to fall apart, I'm going to have to reassess. But if those are successful, what I look forward to next for the team, he's delivering the results of when they arrive in the north zone, revisiting what I saw in 2022 as the potential of that area, right? And so what I saw at that area was where at depth, it started to pick up in some mineralization tenor, primarily copper, with regards to some of the diking that was exhibited there and the mineralization that was resulting. The one that people who've talked to me or been following this for me, they'll know will say is around the chalcocite, seeing 80% by weight copper mineralization exhibiting in primary hypogene is a very unusual arrangement and is very, we'll say, attractive from a potential future arrangement of some of the intercepts that might hit some of the material there. We might see what is available turning into what would be a block cave arrangement, right, at depth. And that's the kind of mineralization you want to see over continuous intervals that will be able to define or develop one of those. I like to think of some of the projects even in BC, like for example with Red Chris, right? So Red Chris originally was a high-grade gold starter pit. It eventually expanded out into some of the more moderate to lower grade material and some of the other side of it, while sustaining the capital requirements to now develop its block cave that is well, for example, in the Eastern Deeps, below that 1,200 meter mark, right? And so what I see at AE is the potential to string all of these things together. And so far, materially, they've advanced on all those fronts and have checked those boxes for me. The other items, and this is the wild card, not on my bingo card situation, was in around the IP embayment. So if you go through some of the older material on AE, you'll note that some of the operators identified that as a potential. And actually right out the gate here with hole 19, in addition to advancing some of the southwest gold zone development, they've actually extended that hole out into the peripheral of that target. And so if we see some promising results out of that, I think that would warrant it potentially to be a target of merit. And we can see where that goes. That's another option on the table to be advanced, which would be something that I would like to see positively developed. And then, of course, this project is huge. If you look at the footprint of the porphyry intrusive itself, and then take and extrapolate what we've seen on the west side, the question mark goes to, well, what do we see on the east and on the northeast and the north sides of this project? I don't think we see that happening or being materially advanced this year, but who knows? If things go very positive this year, we could see it expanded as well, because I'd love to see the value of that daylighted on account of, at that point, we're now established as a very large and attractive target here in BC. Yeah.
Good stuff. I'm going to have to take a cold shower after this conversation. The southwest zone that you're talking about, we could call that the copper gold stockwork zone, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm identifying at that point. Yeah, it's from surface, effectively just underneath the till, and that in that area is actually the least amount of till. I think it's like 10 meters is some of the most shallow till, and then yeah, it's extending. So from the historical results you can review, it goes down to almost 200 meters. But yeah, I was seeing some promising results there early on at the walk down of the site tour we were on, showing it extending materially beyond that. And if that ends up holding grade, that's going to demonstrate a very attractive expansion of volume right off the hop. And if we see that extended from there, be it north, east, or otherwise, yeah, I think it's going to draw a lot of attention. I'll talk to, like, from a technical side, what you're looking for a stockworks arrangement is typically around the upper region of the porphyry, which is where we're encountering it, and it's typically in and around the edges. But it's not to say you can't see it at depth to the center of the area as well, because directly below it is typically where you would then see the more disseminated copper set.
Okay, and the gold grades are obviously really key in that copper gold stockwork zones, because we might have with let's say holes 18 or 20, and I'm just making this up, just throwing numbers out of thin air. Let's say that the copper grades might be 0.2 or 0.3%, but as you mentioned, the gold grades could be 0.5 grams, 0.6 grams, 0.7 grams. And then that makes it an incredible hole, right? So the gold grades are really key there. What did you identify on the site visit that said these holes might be good?
Yeah, so the hole that had available was the initial 19, which had wrapped up. That was available for the surface side of it as well as the at depth. And on the surface side of it, we continue to see that stockwork expression as seen in some of the historical holes, as well as across 1, 2, and 8, 10. And so seeing that in 19, very promising. Didn't see to the extent of the depth of where that was, but to see that they had taken that material step out and then drilled that completion, it was good to see. And then the follow-up hole to 19 with that drill rig being tested was hole 21, and that was cut off. I believe the intent of that one was to be less than 500 meters. So my understanding of AE strategy is that they're going to field the drill rig number 2 to focus on shorter holes in this area. And seeing again the stockworks from surface extending down beyond that 200-meter mark. And so in addition to seeing the stockworks upon like hand lensing it, you also see that associated boronite and chalcopyrite in the small tiny stockwork vein set. And we have knowledge based on the other holes that are there that when seeing those mineralization inside the stockwork, it is known to be associated with gold. So early indications of that stockwork zone results that have been advanced to date are showing promise, right? So we still got to wait for assays, but what I look forward to is it assaying with that gold, and then also materially showing that the depths of it are increasing, right? Like I said, I think one of the deeper holes drilled into it back historically was up to 200 meters, and that was grading, I think, just around 0.6. I don't have my notes here available, but yeah, to see we'll say, I don't know, a 200 plus meter hole at 0.6 or higher, I mean, you're dropping over 100 gram meters or GT thickness into this market right now. I don't think anybody's expecting it, right? Like for gold exploration in BC right now, it's pretty quiet. I mean, we did see some stuff out of Goliath, but that's up in the Golden Triangle and at depth, right? We're talking open pitable from surface, Babine district gold results, right? Like this is what enabled Bell and Grand Isle, the existing historical mines there, to really get off the ground. And so what I'm seeing is the initial indications that might also be available to the NAC project.
Okay. And we got about 10 minutes left. If anybody has a question for Nate, we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. So go ahead and ask to activate your speaker capabilities and I'll grant them. Another question from me, Nate, is how many stocks can you sort of handle in your portfolio at one time? Like, what's your bandwidth, and when does it get to be a little bit too many and you have to say, okay, that's enough?
That's a great question. Yeah, so I mean, it's form and function, right? I would say after doing this for 14 years now, I have a pretty good understanding of where all the projects I've ever been interested in are at. I'll say over that 14-year period, I've definitely cracked open and gone deeper in some, not as deep in others. But I've got enough of, we'll call it finger on the pulse, that, having seen the daily news results that come out of junior mining, or any of the other results I can initially get out of the companies I subscribe to, is I can quickly thumb suck where and how I expect those results to land. So at any given time, I typically have a deep dive going on, right? And by deep dive, I mean significant. I'm putting a lot of focus into it. And that'll consume me. I'm usually only putting that level of focus on one at a time, and it's where I can find my free time to put into it, right? At that point, once I feel studied on it, I'll usually put it to the side and then have my notes available for reference, and I'll move on to the next, right? Very rarely do I see a set of new results, for example, that then jump something to the front of the line, or it's something that I haven't seen before, right? Having a compendium of understood and knowledgeable what projects are being advanced globally, it takes time and experience to develop that level, right? Anybody coming into this right now would have a challenge to develop that, but that's where a decade plus of experience doing this and grinding away allows me to be fortunate enough to have that at my fingertips, right? So to answer your question, I've got a lot of notes and studies that I can reference. I've got all the historical from some of the super majors and mines at my disposal, and then at any given time, I'm usually focusing on one, or starting to look at maybe some others that I should assess to dive in deeper. I think the other thing too is that it has to speak to you. And coming back to why do you focus on copper porphyries? It's they speak to me. I look at them, I like them. They're all puzzles to me. No single porphyry is the same. You have the traditional model, but then things come in and express themselves that violate that model and surprise you. So for example, AE, my early days exploration of it was just what the heck am I looking at here? This is something I haven't seen before. So it was new and novel, and as a result, gained even more attention at that time. And it's probably what brought me back in 2023, because otherwise, it would have been just, okay, we'll see what happens in advance later on. So I think it's the intersection of experience and interest that has led to me some of the success in these projects I've exposed myself to, and is what arguably is my quote unquote edge that I've convinced myself that I've developed, because it allows you to gut check things. Something will set off the spidey senses, as it were, right? And that's that's where I'd say that comes from.
Yeah, it's got to speak to you. I like that quote. It's got to speak to you. Yeah. So a couple of things that speak to me and have spoken to me: go on the American Eagle Gold website, pull up the core pit gallery, and review the drill core. That speaks more than words, right? That looks like an ore body. And then last year, Hercules Silver, October 10, 2023, that news of the blind copper porphyry discovery there in Idaho, that spoke to me. So sometimes, when we have the experience, read some news of a new discovery, keep digging, things are going to speak to you. But a lot in the sector is not going to speak, and you just have to kind of read it and move on. A lot of reading and moving on and going on. So I'm going to ask you one more question, Nate. And you're a mining engineer by trade. We haven't really talked about that, but that's definitely your education and your background sort of gives you a little bit of an edge over some investors in the sector. But you're clearly very keen on being an investor. You're very knowledgeable. You're smart. You've had some good results as far as I can tell. You do good research. Do you think about being a full-time investor? Does that come across your mind ever?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea around, and I think we should have started with this, is, full disclaimer, you should probably never take any investment advice for somebody who has to work for a living, right? And regards to your question, I mean, I've considered, people approached me and said, hey, why don't you do a newsletter or contribute to it in some material way? And to me, I come back to what I said earlier, which was the reason I went public in 2019, 2020 there was on account of the seeking of feedback and engagement and critique. Now, will that ever transform into somehow convince myself I'm able to deliver the level of value to say, hey, you should subscribe to me? We'll see. But at this time, I'm very happy just to share, and of course, hit them with the discount of hey, I'm doing this and I'm learning this. I may not be right, and at the end of the day, I would hate to say, or be approached and say, oh man, I lost all this money because you had an idea and it didn't work out, and I'd say, yeah. Well, that's why I never tried to take any money from you, and I encourage you not to do, because anybody who gets into the space should probably go and talk to a financial advisor, and then if they're a competent financial advisor, they probably hit them on the head, right? This is not a great place for people to play in, and like I said earlier too, it's unless you're good with getting punched in the face and smiling at it, it's going to wash you out pretty quickly. So, if I ever get to the point where I can sustain myself off the returns I've seen off this, I mean, you'll probably just hear me continue doing what I'm I'm doing. I mean, I love this space. I really enjoy the people in it. I think it attracts a certain type of individual that, you wouldn't mind being in the trenches with, right? So I'm happy to continue sharing and engaging with at this time. So yeah, the other side too, I mean, having been approached and talked to by some, funds or otherwise, is that I am also concerned around the idea of hamstringing myself or tying my hands with regards to what I can and can't do. I have a lot of flexibility right now in my current arrangement, and I'm happy for it, right? So I would hate to end up in a situation where I'm not able to enjoy the freedom and flexibility that I do have.
Very well said. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that should be a reminder to everybody on this call. Though I'm pretty sure that everybody knows that already. But yeah, this conversation is just two friends having a chat, making it publicly available. This is not investment advice, and yeah, you have to have some certain level of insanity to be an investor in the sector, at times. And definitely, if you speak to a professional investment advisor who's registered with the SEC or something, they're probably going to say, no, we're going to put you in SPY or QQQ. But hey, it makes it more fun to be in this crazy volatile sector where you can have 10Xs, happen when the due diligence and a little luck comes together. Nate, thank you so much for this hour. This is a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for tuning in. This will be made available on my YouTube at Goldfinger Capital in the next couple of days. And you can be sure I'll post it on X and co.ca. Nate, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, it's been a great chat. Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.